Today we're joined by someone called Ibrahim Wali, uh, who has emphasized that it's best we introduce him as a Nigerian citizen for reasons that I'm sure will become very clear very soon. But Ibrahim is, amongst other things, part of a phenomenon, a movement perhaps, that has been identified by the hashtag Rant It Out. And some of our listeners might have encountered these folks already through a number of mediums, but most prominently Twitter Spaces, where the Ranters have carved out an interesting new niche for radical criticism, deliberation, airing out alternative views about the situation in Nigeria, especially in northern Nigeria, and also perhaps also considering alternatives to the status quo. So we're very glad to be joined by Ibrahim for a conversation today about the Ranters, but also about northern Nigerian politics in general. And I suppose one thing to add before handing the floor to him is that in recent times, I think radically minded Nigerians, especially in the South, have been, the honest ones anyway, have increasingly been coming to the realization that we understand very little what's happening in northern Nigeria. And I think the end bad governance protests, the Russian flag phenomenon, the outpouring of disenchantment in the form of street protests in places like Kano, Katsina, Borno, and elsewhere, really emphasize that what a lot of thinkers kind of assumed were ideas or feelings that were restricted to discussion circles of radically inclined middle-class people were in fact much more broadly felt, and in corners of the country that we understand very little. So I think talking to Ibrahim today and to the Ranters, we hope would provide an opportunity to dig into some of these dynamics, come to a better understanding of them. So for that reason, we are really glad to be joined by Ibrahim. Thank you for making time today.
It's actually my pleasure, to have a platform to say some of the things that we've been saying for quite a long time now is really our pleasure, and we're glad to be here. And I said we anyway, but I have to give a disclaimer. At the Rant HQ, we have some set of ethos, some set of values that we all agree upon, but then when it comes to the methodology, when it comes to our opinions, when it comes to the meat of it and the extent of it, we maintain to a large extent our individualism as well. But then what we try to do is we try to measure every opinion, every statement, every submission against those grounded values that we feel like are the core, of the entire. Well, you call it movement. For some people, it's a movement. For others, it's just an avenue to express themselves about the state of affairs. So it is a lot of things for different people, and we try to maintain that individualistic disposition alongside our grounded values.
Okay, well, that's well understood. So I suppose we won't expect you to necessarily speak for the others, per se, but of course, it would be interesting to hear your perspective on how, this phenomenon, movement, etc., has evolved. And I suppose that's maybe the first place to even start, is to say, who are the Ranters? What is Rant HQ? And how would you account for its emergence?
Yes, indeed, that's actually a very good place to start. And I'm very glad to actually explain it, because I happen to be one of the first people who actually stumbled upon it. I would say stumbled upon it because it wasn't a premeditated decision by any of us, frankly. What had happened was that our current host, MK, a very great guy, was hosting a space, just a random space with some, young Nigerians, and they were discussing, issues about, the country generally, and where we are heading and where we are currently, and, just literally everything that we discuss every other day. So I joined the space, obviously, as a mere audience, but I know MK personally. I know him on Twitter, and I know him personally in person as well. But I just joined this space without any invitation whatsoever as an audience. So I was just listening to the space, And frankly, I felt like there was just too much patronizing. There was too much political correctness. I just felt like I've been a ranter all my life, if that makes any sense. I've had problems with the status quo almost all my life. So frankly, I went there even to some extent as an adversary, right? Because I knew that, okay, because I saw some of the accounts and I knew that, okay, a lot of them were pro-government guys, a lot of them, were fences, so to speak. So I remember telling MK just on the timeline that why are you giving them all these allowances to come and say or to come and regurgitate all these misconceptions and all these statements that have ensured that our consciousness has been grounded. Our consciousness has been misplaced. Like, I mean, these are rhetorics that our so-called leaders have propagated for a long time, that has ensured that we don't understand what is the situation on the ground and what ought to be. So it was just a challenge, a challenge, because that's just what I do, right? And then he said, well, should I open up a space for you to come and say what you think of the issues? I was like, sure, why not? And he said, all right, what about tomorrow? I said, tomorrow is fine. So he just titled it, Rant HQ, Rant with Ibn Wali. And, we started and, he opened the space and, in fact, I was about the only person who was ranting on that day. So I was just going on about different issues with no decorum whatsoever. I wasn't civil, I wasn't decorous, right? I was raw, and I was just saying things from my heart, frankly. I started with English, I ended up with Hausa. I even, I'm a Nupe guy from Niger State. I even ended up, using at some points because, look, some of these issues, and, we were discussing earlier with you and when you were talking about language, and what we've tried to do in Lance HQ is that, come naturally. If you are using Hausa or Igbo or whatever, just come like that, because we know that is the way you would probably express yourself better. So, but then, for our surprise, or to his surprise rather, many people joined, and they seem to, appreciate it. They seem to appreciate the fact that, there was no political correctness. Nobody was throwing their titles around. Nobody was throwing their, clout around. It wasn't about the speaker. It wasn't about the, it was just the issues, just like you hear them in the streets, right? And then gradually, it began to, gain traction, and people began to join. What is important to note is that nobody was invited to the Rants HQ. None of us, not myself. Well, obviously, this story might look like an invite, but it wasn't as if we were going to have a Rants HQ or whatever. So nobody was actually invited. So our subsequent speakers who have become, core members today actually joined in because they agreed and with what we were saying. And that is one of our ethos as well, right? Only the truth, only the message should invite participants. We don't care about your clout, we don't care about your reach, we don't care about anything, as long as you don't join in because of the substance of the message, then you're not invited, basically. So there's really no rules as to participation. It's simply based on substance. So most of the current stakeholders, our household names on Rants HQ really joined at different times. Some people joined at the fourth session or the fifth session or the sixth session. Literally all you have to do is come and make your submission, and then if we feel like and that doesn't mean me personally, but if generally the audience, the house, and everybody feels like this person's submission is quite insightful and raw and passionate, you become part of it. And we don't have a WhatsApp group or anything like that we go after and deliberate on issues. So we like to say that everything begins and ends on the space, and so that we can maintain transparency. And we don't want to also of course, as we were growing, obviously the rules kept changing and, kept evolving, but literally everything about it has been natural, but the rules themselves and the people, the participants. So that is basically how it began, really. So even in fact, 90% of the people, are active in Rants HQ today. I didn't know them before that first session. I didn't know them at all. Frankly, most of them I didn't know. But today, we're brothers and sisters in the same struggle. So I think that is just a short history of how it began.
Fair enough. I mean, so there certainly seem in that narrative to be a few very important themes, something around spontaneity, something around the sort of organic nature. Obviously, it's mediated by Twitter and the online world, and then there's an emphasis on dispensing with a certain kind of emphasis on decorum or civility. But how else would you characterize the message, so to speak? I mean, what are you ranting about, I suppose?
All right. So we have two types of sessions generally. We have the annual general meeting, as we like to call it, every Saturday at 9. We just come and, there's no theme. People just come and they just, just say their mind, concerning anything that they must have seen either online or offline, or anything that has to do with their life. For example, my first 3 or 4 rants revolved around my own, life, how I went from relatively fine to just absolutely, in a state of despair, with no doing of my own entirely. So obviously the PMS situation, the electricity tariff, all of that, just came naturally. But we also have the extraordinary or emergency general meetings that we do that, any member can just call an EGM, right? Can just, ask the host and just say, okay, probably we need an EGM for special or specific issues. So for example, the Maiduguri Dam, the Alu Dam collapse, for example, we had an EGM for it. If there's any banditry attack, we have an EGM for it. The last time that the PMS price was increased, we had an EGM for it. So any specific issue, or when maybe a politician, either a governor or a president, when they make a declaration or a policy or a speech or whatever it is, and anybody feels like, okay, we need to expose, because that is usually what we do. We expose the folly and the foolishness in their actions so far, and we try to show people how to identify, who is serious, who is not serious, what issues are serious, what issues are not serious, what to look out for, and all of that. So, but everything, either the general or the extraordinary general meeting, is anchored upon an aggressive anti-establishment stance. Frankly, we don't even claim objectivity. We don't claim objectivity. Anti-establishment. Frankly, if anybody comes to the HQ is popular for one thing. If anybody comes and tries to make us understand the place of our leaders, or the establishment, like we like to call them, or their extensions, to sort of make a case for them, we just descend on the people, on the person, because regardless of our methods, you will find that we have seriously grounded people who are grounded in history, politics, and law. But they don't come from that perspective. But obviously, whatever they say, their submissions are going to be regulated and guided by that knowledge all the same, right? But they don't make it seem as if this is where we are coming from, because we just want to maintain that natural and that organic flow. So you find that we have already agreed and decided that, look, whatever the case is, we have to hold these people guilty or in contempt until proven otherwise, with beyond reasonable doubt. So it's just, we turned the beyond reasonable doubts concept in criminal law on its head, and said that when it comes to our politicians, when it comes to these political parties, when it comes to the establishment, you have to understand that we are coming from a losing position, and we're coming from serious wounds, serious defeat. So we don't have the time, we don't have the tools, the resources, we don't have anything to just say, okay, let us meet at the middle and discuss. We believe that if you give them one step, they take 2, they take 3. So it is better for us to be clearly against them, and we're averse against their nature of politics, everything. But then we also have certain spin-offs, like we have the hard talk that some of us like to do. In the hard talk, we can come and we can discuss on an issue, look at it objectively, offer solutions and all of that. I'm really involved in that because, frankly, it is my belief that there's just no solution out there, that is not, within the public knowledge. I shouldn't be the one giving solutions on policies that some people are being paid to solve. Frankly, I'm not really in support of that, but then obviously the Ranters HQ is bigger than myself. So because of that disagreement, some people decided, okay, fine, let's just have a hard talk space where they can invite certain people and talk about certain things and stuff like that. Sometimes I join because I understand their credibility and their honesty, and I understand that they're trying to just be objective generally, and it's fine. But then they also understand that when it comes to Rant HQ, we don't allow at all. We're pro people, we are anti-establishment, and everything that our cause, our ethos, revolve around those two stances. So that is basically how it operates so far anyway. But it's also important to know that we also have, amongst us, we have authors, we have people who write on different issues, but we don't give them the topic. We don't say, okay, write on this, write on that, or talk on this, or talk on that. But that you are a member of the Rant HQ doesn't mean that if you write on an issue, for example, the HQ is going to adopt it, right? We still look at the content and measure it against the values of the space. So we don't have any permanent members who can say whatever they want to say at any time. We're more subjected to the ethos, to the values themselves. So it's even part of one of the things that we're trying to really tell the people and inform the people and teach the people that, look, don't be slaves to personalities, right? Don't be slaves to personalities, be slaves to principles, to values, to ethos, and anybody, regardless of your experience with them, regardless of how much you look up to them, regardless of your history with them, the moment they're deviating from the core principles, then it's time for you to also relegate them and ensure that you proceed on those issues. So that is what we're trying to do generally. So we're not really bound into any personality, including myself, by the way.
Excellent. To take a step back, because this has been quite interesting reflection on what the group or the movement really is about. But I want to understand a little the context in which it arose, and to put it even in a sort of political context, and see what resonates with you. So I think that in the past decade or so, especially under the Buhari period, there was a sense in some radical circles in Nigeria, especially southern radical circles to be precise, that it would be hard to locate really anti-systemic or anti-establishment ideas in northern Nigeria, because the perception was that having a northern president who did have, at a certain point anyway, something of a cult following within the context of a fairly dominant sort of religious class of pro-establishment clerics, and in the context of fairly dramatic and biting poverty, which of course is a national problem, but is often expressed most intensely in parts of the North, that anti-establishment thinking and serious criticisms of the status quo were unlikely to emerge in those contexts. Do you buy that? Is there a sense in which there has been a kind of cap or restriction or sort of obstacle in the way of real anti-establishment or radical ideas emerging in northern Nigeria of recent? And if so, what has given way to allow for this to become a reality in the contemporary moment?
This is actually a very, very, very smart question, sometimes controversial. I agree to a large extent with the Southern disposition in that regard, or the Southern assessment. I myself, to some extent, I was more in tune with Southern advocacy than I was with that of the Northern advocacy. I have to admit that for the most of my teenage years, I was somewhat anti-northern establishment, because I felt like I felt the same way. Actually, I felt like, okay, there was very little to no resistance from the North, and I felt like the religious class, the leadership class, and the youth, literally everybody was in bed with the mediocrity and stuff like that. But obviously that was before I expanded my research, and I found out that for example, my foremost, I wouldn't want to use idol, but someone that I really look up to in Nigeria, is passed away now, is Yusuf Bala Usman. When I started reading his works, also
yes, very much,
right?
Very much a friend of ours.
That's just my guy, frankly. That's my guy. Like, I have 2 or 3 of his books literally right before me. Minority Report on Draft Constitution for the Liberation of Nigeria. That's just my guy, frankly. I really appreciate his work. Saad Zungur, to some extent, frankly, I don't know much about him, but just on the surface. But I agree that recently, or at least in my lifetime, frankly, advocacy in the North has been almost non-existent. Because even if you look at when I was coming up, the people that I used to look up to were, advocates. Today, Dele Farotimi, for example, so to some extent, Adegboru and even in my profession, because I'm a lawyer, Adegboru and Femi Falana, right? I naturally, I gravitate towards them. So, but what actually happened was that for the majority of Buhari's administration, and including Abu Bello, who was my governor at the time, I was almost like a lone ranger on the other side. Yes, I'm in the north, I'm from the north, but I was aggressively anti-Buhari and anti-APC and literally, the establishment at the time. But more time I was alone, frankly. More time I was alone. I felt that heat. Sometimes I used to get accusations of being like I didn't have that passion for the North or for sometimes for Islam, because the thing with when the clerical class are also pro establishment, they make you feel guilty, they make you feel less religious and stuff like that. But I persisted, I insisted, because it wasn't as if there were arguments on their part that really were superior to what I felt like was the case. And I am a product of aggressive self-learning, frankly. I didn't learn any of this in school or in any chamber or even at home, frankly. My father, for example, is mostly on the other side as well when you argue, right? I mean, he's a fine gentleman, but you find that he's also a victim of that prolonged, sustained indoctrination, is what I call it anyway. So I myself felt like that initially, but recently, and especially with the Rant HQ, I've met some guys from the north that are, that have made me, literally struggle for breath, because I'm like, wow, like, where were you all this while? I mean, this is actually the first group that I've ever joined in my entire life when it comes to advocacy, because I am actually very wary. I mean, I understand that I don't want to oppress with people, are probably being sponsored or who have an ulterior motive. I'm very, very careful about that. So I never joined any group, any advocacy group or any human rights group or anything like that. I was just doing my thing really until I met this set. Most of them are from the north, and you would find that, subhanAllah, some of them are from Katsina, some from Kano, Nasarawa, and I was like, oh wow, if these people are this conscious, then maybe the assumption that I myself also held, maybe it's time to challenge it, maybe it's time to confront it, right? Most of the people who used to confront it were coming from that, oh, you have been condescending and stuff like that. But look, I don't mind if you tell me that I'm this or that. I look at the substance. I look at, whether indeed it's true or not. So I didn't think that it was a South versus Northern thing. I felt like, look, there's truth to it, and it behoves on us to actually, work with the truth and not worry about whatever, distractions, follow it. But if there's no truth to it, then it wouldn't even be the case entirely. So I think that indeed there is a resurgence, without a doubt, because even in the streets, to some extent, I've met quite a few people who have expressed appreciation for what I do and what we do. So I feel like indeed there is a reawakening. If you remember Buhari's coming, it was as if he came in as a messiah, as a saint, somebody who was coming to solve our problems, even though he had recorded history, when he was military head of state. Like, so that was my problem anyway, because I felt like, okay, all the arguments that they were making for him, were not hinged on what he did at the time, or his antecedents or what he wants to do. I felt like he didn't have any policy, any framework whatsoever that I could hold to say, okay, maybe it made sense, and it just didn't make any sense. But frankly, I was literally all alone at the time. So to a large extent, the accusation, to the extent that it is honest, is true. But I feel like it's because the so-called radical voices probably haven't had the necessary platform or necessary network or connection to actually propagate and to actualize their ideas and to promote their ideas. And I feel like this is the gap that we're trying to close currently with Rant HQ.
Yeah, excellent. That's really helpful. Let me throw in one more question before I hand over the mic to Emeka. One of the ways in which, let's say, progressive-minded, kind of middle-class, pro-Northern people have responded to that criticism of the degeneracy of northern political class in the past has been to say, well, in fact, more recently there has been a more technocratic archetype, a kind of more good governance oriented northern politician that has emerged, and that criticism is not cognizant of people like that. Just throw out some names, El Rufai, or
I knew you were going to say Rufai. I knew.
or some people
That's
might
why
add
he's just so.
some people might add Zulum to that list. I don't know,
Hey,
maybe in a different column, maybe not SLS or whatever. Like I
am I
think I
allowed to
probably
be? Am I allowed to rant his shoe here? Like, am I allowed to
yeah.
wear that disposition? Because I'm not very politically correct, frankly.
This is the most politically incorrect show, so please, we
Right.
yeah, speak from the heart. But I guess I wonder what you think of these kinds of donor darling kind of technocrats, and maybe to even stir up the pot a bit more. There was this poster that went around a while back that had Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala as a candidate and El Rufai as, I think, president, one or the
I think
other, and the
we had
people.
a 4 hours argument on that in one of the
Okay.
groups, actually.
Okay, right. I mean, it seems like it's an expression of that same sentiment that
It is.
what's lacking, and what we're increasingly seeing is better English speaking, kind of foreign educated,
Yes.
more sort of donor adjacent leaders, both in the south and the north. But with the
Yes.
emphasis being that, oh, okay, it's no longer accurate to use a broad brush to paint Nigerian politicians because we have this new school of change makers emerging. So yeah, I mean, what's your take?
Just on the surface, these aren't any new school people. Everybody has been there since Obasanjo's era, right? He has been there, BP, FCT. He has been there, right? He's not new to me. Maybe they think that he is new to me. He's not new. And for Zulum, for example, he has just never done anything that would warrant me to think, for example, that he's any different. I think that he's actually worse than a lot of them because, in my estimation, he was the one who ushered this palliative almajorification charity governance that we see today. Because I remember even, when he became governor early on, you would see, they used to do this PR where you would see a lot of people arranged in files, in lines with one bag of rice and oil, in front of them and stuff like that. And frankly, I felt like I felt like that was disrespectful to the people, right? I felt like, I don't feel like, making people projects is the way to go. I feel like you can actually do projects without exposing the beneficiaries of the project, because most of these things are their rights anyway, although I don't consider them as projects anyway. You can't just share rights and, experience governance. But for someone like El Rufai, for example, for me, I am really, it's about substance for me. It's about principles. You can speak all the English in the world, right? I don't have any, I'm not drawn to the sophistry. I'm not drawn to articulation or accent or anything like that, frankly. I'm drawn to substance. So I don't think El Rufai has ever done anything that would, any institutional thing that would have, drawn me to him. Now, most of his supporters, his fans, they like to point out to, roads that he painted, this and that. But anytime I say, okay, fine, okay, he was governor for 8 years in Kaduna State. All right, fine. How many million people were lifted out of poverty? Like reasonably lifted out of poverty, and not just people who had proximity to him, and it turns to something else entirely. There's just, really no substance. Okay, when I say, for example, okay, what is his democratic antecedent, right? Is he democratic in nature? Does he understand the place of the rule of law, for example, right? Because I think that is like the number one thing, frankly, on my list of important things, right? What is his place when it comes to the rule of law? But El Rufai, when you listen to his statements, for example, his fracas with Southern Kaduna, I felt like all of that was unnecessary. Like they used to support him because they felt like he was fierce, he was bold. But I felt like as a leader, it doesn't matter if, whether your proximity or your connection or your identity, it doesn't matter. You are the governor of Kaduna State. So it doesn't matter what you think or what you don't think. If there's a security problem, it doesn't matter if you think that it is orchestrated by them or whatever, you must solve it. That is all of that doesn't matter anymore, because you are a leader to literally every single indigenous and resident, and literally every single territory in the entirety of Kaduna State. So for a governor to position himself in a way that makes it seem as if he's against a people, whether it's true or not, he didn't help he didn't help matters himself. I felt like it was damning. I felt like it was damning, and I didn't think that all those roads and all those bridges we're going to add anything to the common man, frankly. I just don't see any. I just don't see how they like to say he's better than the rest and this and that. But frankly, for me, this is just not enough. I'm more institutional. I am more about. I'm not about personality. I'm more about who actually thinks about the future, not just the present, the future. Okay, you want to leave behind a system where, for example, the employment regime is totally, merit-based and has nothing to do with, nepotism, or your contract, your procurement process, for example, right? Regardless of whatever you do, if I find that, for example, it wasn't done through a public bidding and tendering and, all of that according to the respective laws, it doesn't make any sense to me, because, you are just entrenching corruption and, and stuff like that. So regardless of, the surface, frankly, the surface of it, I never just felt like these guys were any better than any other leader, frankly. I can't see it. I get a lot of flack for this, frankly. I remember when they were doing the Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala versus Erifai, and I was like, by what metric is he better than her? And then everything was political. He was able to, win politics. And I'm like, but yeah, Bill, what was governor for 8 years as well. Better than. So we were saying, okay, she's a professor, she's this, okay, she's in an office where only your competence can take you to the office and stuff like that. But, all of those points just went over their head. And frankly, it was frustrating, because in my mind, I was like, this is NOI we speak of. Come on, like, it shouldn't have been really, that's what I thought anyway. I felt like, it shouldn't have been a debate. I mean, it's evidence that she's more sophisticated, but then I guess, we see things differently.
I would say some of us saw that whole thing as a false choice anyway, because it's kind of like between two neoliberals. I mean, what's really, maybe one that's like
anyway, he's equally a neoliberal, just like himself anyway. So it was just by their own merits, but in terms of Nigeria, none of them is really. I don't think any of them can do anything that has not been done before. They are neoliberals, and I don't think that they try to. And I like that you mentioned this, because it's actually one of my problems with our leaders and African leaders generally. I feel like for some reason they just consume. I schooled in London myself, but I used to question everything. I don't have any serious admiration or trust. When it comes to the West, I don't feel like they actually have any solution. In fact, I feel like they themselves are slipping into degeneracy, right? But I don't know how, for some reason, our leaders, because just like you said, most of them are neoliberals, how they still tilt towards, Western propounded theories and Western backed, policies, and they try to just slap it on us without seeing the irony.
One of Emeka's friends once said that we African elite have stopped trying to import Western solutions to fix African problems, and have just started importing Western problems. But anyway, let me hand it over to Emeka. Speaking of Emeka, to see if he has some follow-up questions.
That's fine.
Wow, I didn't think that this day would come. When we would have, frankly speaking, this sort of open-ended conversation about what I personally would term, well, it's not my own coinage, but the North-South dichotomy.
I have serious submissions in that regard, but go on, please. Yes.
Yeah, so so it's it gladdens my heart. It's really refreshing to hear your own perspectives about this. And then to my mind, what we seem to be, the conversation that I am following here seems to be about maybe what you call the subset because I mean, from all that you said, one can easily identify that even though your own sentiments are not, foremost, they're not what you would call the more popular opinion. There seems to be a subsect of the North, as it is with the South, who think that these guys are just a bunch of jokes. But that it also resonates with perhaps what I would identify as middle class, or being, northern. I don't want to limit it to youth, but but just for lack of a better word.
Don't worry, I'm not going to be offended.
I'm not even trying not to offend, to be honest, but I'm even trying to be provocative, but I mean, what I'm trying to get at here is the fact that there's a sense that I get, that these lies have been repeated so much that, a large cross section of the Nigerian populace thinks that it's true, and these problems also exist, when it boils down to ideology, even in the South. So, a big part of, to go back to say maybe the Buhari administration and some of the players within it, when push comes to shove, is that people tend to see the APC as transformational, thus this whole progressive appellation, and that one way that they try to transform is to modernize. So you have, a sense in which the conversation deals into the modernization versus, the old structure thing, for lack of a better word, provincialism versus maybe modernization, if I put it that way. Uh, and that argument doesn't, quite fly with me. And that's why I found, some of the points that you made really fascinating, because I also have that problem, even, with some of these southern governors. And I'll give you an example. You say you're from Niger State, I'm from Enugu, and I always tell Said all of the time that part of our problem is that we don't hold the governors. I mean, there's so much focus on federal government, very little focus on state governance, that is become such that these guys get get away with a lot of rubbish. Take even the Bronu Aludam thing, for instance. It's not a humanitarian case, but
We're actually the first set on Twitter, and I had to take the initiative in that regard to say it immediately. It happened that this is not a natural disaster, and they came for us like, why are you guys always insensitive? But this is not a natural. I don't care. I don't care. It's not a natural disaster. It wasn't. I'm going to say it anyway.
It's gross negligence. Yeah. So I mean, so I guess just to be more pointed about my question, I guess that the question I'm looking to ask is, with all this talk about technocrats, in governance, at the place, the spectrum within which El Rufai would want to be located, how much interrogation has gone into it, and I hear a bit of that interrogation going on in your own submissions, but how broad based is it, because it's, yes, we've yielded the platform to some of this, adherents of, the new liberal narrative, but what do you think simmers underneath the surface, and I asked that question because, I mean, it's come to the fore now, and El Rufai is beginning to hear, just to use him as an example, is beginning to, dance to the music, where the State House of Assembly is saying, oh, okay, yeah, you did all of this, but you incurred the debt of over $500 million. All right. And that the state has to pay for it. So it seems to be the cause of the rift between him and the state government, the State House of Assembly to an extent, but also to an extension to even his godson. And this happens, in the South, a lot of the time. So I'll use Enugu as an example. So we have a governor who's come up with a budget for 500 billion, and I'll give you an example. What accrues to Enugu State from FAC is maybe 120 billion, everything put together. What the states managed to generate, And these days they say it's about 35 billion. So if you add 35 billion to 125 billion, is 155 billion. So where are you coming up with a budget for 500 billion? So it means that you have to go out and loan monies and all of that. So I guess that the question that I'm trying to ask is what this model of government that some of the northern elites are trying, and I'm trying to run away from, oh, it's a Lagos model thing that they're trying to copy, but it's hard to. So this idea of placing certain states within the South above, certain states, and that this model of governance, that one, trumps the other one. How do you respond to it? And I'm very aware of your response to one of Said's question, where you say, oh, you started out, thinking that or believing that that there's some of the things that happens in the South that the North might want to emulate. I personally think that there are a lot of things that happen in the North.
South, not on the governance sphere, though. I don't see the governance in the South being better than that in the North in any way, but in the visual understanding of the issues.
Right. Criticism of the status quo, maybe.
Yes, frankly, when I talk about the government, I really don't see that much difference between the governor of Niger State and that of Reborn State. Frankly, I feel like they're actually using similar models. You mentioned something about El-Rufai's loans, for example. I went and I did my research and I looked at, the amount of money that was obtained, and then what it was used for, and then I looked at the results, the so-called results, and I'm like, this is not 5 or 10% of the loan. Like these bridges and these roads don't show anything. They don't do anything. By the way, I don't know if you can please bring in my other colleague, Comrade Hamza, because he is more of a comrade. He's from Kano State, a very sharp mind as well.
Yeah, feel free to chime in, anyone really.
Brilliant. So, but responding more specifically to my brother's question. So you asked, to what extent do we actually, criticize these things or look at these things? Frankly, it's even beyond an El-Rufai, for example, right? I have problems with the Constitution, how it was drafted, for example, right? And one of my problems is the fact that they don't know that there's a problem in that regard, or they claim or they act as if there's no problem in that regard, right? So you would see someone really, try to tell you that, they are here for the people, they are this, they are that, but they've not been able to actually identify the problems themselves. They've not been able to actually question and challenge their theories, because even neoliberalism, for example, I am of the belief that, if we were to sit one-on-one with El-Rufai, for example, or even Tinubu, for example, because I think he's also, that I don't think that they actually know the extent and the criticisms of these theories, right? I feel like they're just they just fix them, and they've been running away with it because it helps them, right? I think it just helps their political journey. It helps them to try to make it seem as if they are different or they are special, right? So that is why, for example, Tinubu can tell us, okay, look at the revenue I generated when I was in Lagos. But then anytime you go to Lagos, you are met by that glaring poverty all the same, right? So you were able to generate revenues. You were able to get some new companies who were able to come in and, exploit your resources and your resources, both human and material. And, they were able to generate revenues and they were able to pay certain taxes to you. And you feel like that in itself is supposed to be, an identifier or a metric or, of success. And I feel like that is ridiculous because, like I told you, I schooled in London, I have experience with America. I don't think, for example, that those places are actually really successful countries because if you really analyze and criticize, you would see that most of their citizens are just living equally paycheck to paycheck. They have drug abuse problems. But of course, at the top, when you look at when you use the macro metrics, of course, it feels as if, they are living quite, a decent life. But when I went there, I felt like, okay, this cannot be where we are trying to get to, right? This cannot be an ideal life, right? It's not, it doesn't, really look at fairness, look at equity. It's not social. It's frankly just dog eat dog, really, who actually has the most capacity, the most power to accumulate the most wealth and to accumulate the most social capital, right? And we also try to actually challenge even some textbook economic theories. For example, that is my personal challenge anyway, the scarce resources theory, that, okay, there are scarce resources, so we have to compete for them. I don't feel like it's true. I don't feel like it's grounded. I don't think that the resources are scarce, but obviously in the allocation of the resources, you find that most of it is concentrated in a very, very few people, right, who can't use it for 300 lifetimes, but then the argument is still that resources are scarce and policies must follow that theory. So we try to actually criticize even theories that were proponents even before these guys were even birthed, to be very frank. And I say this because I feel a lot of disgust when they try to limit us to you're anti-RFI or you're anti-BAT or anti. It's just much more than that.
And there's nothing wrong with being anti-RFI.
Yeah, we're proudly anti-RFI on the show. Even though I get
it limits us, and it really just obfuscates the depth and the extent of the issues that we're trying to bring to light, right? He's a human being who has 8 years at best in whatever political office, so it's beyond him. But obviously he's only, we like to look at them as extensions of the problem, or rather the symptoms of the problems. And yes, you have to challenge them without a doubt. You have to confront them to get to the real problem, because they are products of the problem. They are products of the establishment, right? Because, for example, okay, look at Erufai, for example, right? After when he was campaigning for BAT, he made a statement. He said that the Northern Elders Forum feel like they are all that. If they feel like they have the clouds, then they should also declare for an office and get the Telakawas, that is the poor people, to vote for them. So it tells you that in his first year and in his fourth year for re-election, in his mind frame, he didn't think of eradicating that class at all, Telakawa. It's not for the fact that he feels like, okay, if you want to contest or if you want to compete, then get these same poor people to vote for you. Let's see. It means that nobody even wants to eradicate, poverty. So it means that they just want to hold. The people have to be poor. They have to be poor. They have to be impoverished for their success, right? So it just exposes frankly, the shallowness of their so-called depth and thinking. And yes, it's really my belief that immediately you remove all those, poverty inducements. Most Nigerian politicians will not go anywhere, because then they have to now really, really have serious, policy issues to run on, because nobody is going to, take your money or your rights or whatever. You have to now really impose and impress and convince and argue your positions. So frankly, I feel like these all these are elements of the problem. For example, this North-South divide, the religious divide. All of these are symptoms, that are manipulated by the political class. They have been manipulated for the longest period, right? So you can find me arguing with a Southerner who would come for me simply because I'm a Northerner. But in my mind, I'm like, you're just a victim, right? Because at the end of the day, if I have more proximity to a Southern president, I'm going to benefit much more than you from the average guy from the South.
Absolutely.
There's just no evidence that if you are being led by somebody from your camp or from your identity or from your religion or your ethnicity or whatever, then it leads to an improved life for you. There's just no evidence of that. It's all about proximity. It's all about proximity. Close to them, close to their kids, close to their officers, and that's it. So I feel like, frankly, all of this is just a bit of manipulation that has gone on for decades that we're trying to reverse, and frankly, it's not easy.
I hope you don't mind. I need to butt in here and then see if we can yield the floor to Comrade Hamza, because I was going to ask, how much of the conversation he had followed and what opinions he might want to express.
I have listened to everything, actually,
Before you go further, so let me just add this one layer of question to it so that you just take it all at once in one fell swoop. So while we're talking about the political elite, there's the moneyed class, right? And one of the hottest burning issues right now in the country is the price of PMS, the price of petroleum. Of course, nobody needs to tell anybody that this all stems, largely from it's not the crux of the matter, but as regards pricing, the front burner issue is the Dangote refinery and how much it has affected the price of petrol. And in some ways, the subsidy issue. So and then I personally think that part of the way the conversation is playing out is that it's to some extent beginning to be some kind of, again, the north-south dichotomy. I mean, it's not completely that, but there's this narrative that tends towards the belief that now that you have a southern president, that presidency is trying all its best to undermine this refinery. So if you could just chip in amongst other things, what your thoughts are on this, it would be nice to hear.
All right. So you see, as I usually used to say nowadays, is this: when we're talking about Dangote refinery, the issues are surrounding it, whatever is happening regarding the PMS prices for the liter and the politics that people are now championing and echoing, thinking the gospel from one market square to another, from one village to another, saying that is as a result of Swaju being a thousand. That is the reason why Dangote refinery isn't performing in its full function. I think it is more of political statement that you always you only find in the mainstream media. When you come down to northern Nigeria, especially I'm kind of within my grassroots level, I'm within the metropolises, I'm around everybody. You get to ask people like, what is going on with Dangote refinery? Do you think it is something that it's from northern perspective or southern perspective? Nobody cares about that because, sincerely speaking, when you come down northern Nigeria, nobody thinks Dangote is a northerner. When you look at the way he's doing his philanthropic work, in the southern Nigeria, and more people are making appreciative of his effort over there. It's not the same as what people are appreciative of him over here. If you come here to talk about Dangote when it comes to philanthropic work, and doing things that will ensure that livelihood at the macro level of our household is yielding, productivity and so many other things, people will just laugh at you. Because right now in Alpindiki, if you know anybody in Kano, within Kano municipal local government in Alpindiki, one location where his father was born, there is a mosque that he has been building for over 10 years, and often the mosque couldn't have been completed. And when you look at what the promises he made in 2014 when there was the bomb in Emir's palace, mosque, and then he said he's going to provide a functioning surgical theater that will see to it if such kind of things happen, which we don't want to happen in the future. We have enough facilities that will cater for the needs and bring in a lot of people back to life so that we will not miss them because we are in Nigeria. This since 2014 now, it hasn't been completed. So I think the politics of saying that, northerners perceive Dangote shenanigans is more of a southern and northern perspective. It's just, our people that are in mainstream saying all and chewing and spitting all this kind of information. But I'm telling you that the common northerner, the common me, I'm an ordinary northerner and I'm an Almajiri. We don't care about that. We don't even have to even reason from that. Because if you look at the sophistication of the thoughts that is coming around this argument, you get to see it's from people that are even more exposed to the reality of what, the economics of the crude oil is in Nigeria. Majority of us, when you look at the means of the livelihood, you get to see it's in informal sector, it's businesses and other things. So therefore, there is that, barrier between, understanding of these questions with regards to such kind of politics. But all what I'm trying to tell you is that we just don't even understand why nowadays that just the price of a liter cannot be set by the person that is refining the crude oil. That is the issue. Everybody, when you go there and I will tell you, how comes is somebody else saying that the price of the liter of the PMS is that it's not the person that is giving it. What is happening? When does this become? Because even everybody, even the educated professors, this is unorthodox. It has never been present. There is nowhere in Nigeria that this has been the case. But you get to talk about the politics of the crude oil, the economy of what have you, and whatever. Perhaps Dangote was so naive that he thinks it is 2003 Olusegun Obasanjo is going to hand him monopoly over this MyPS. And so let's sleep on that. And then if we move further, we're discussing about radical change in politics in northern Nigeria. So you get looked into it from various perspectives. And if you are building the argument, I think we shouldn't even consider homogeneity with regards to the solutions, with regards to the arguments. Because if you look at the heterogeneity that already defines Nigeria, it is predominant, it is pre-existing to a certain level that especially people like Wali and others, that having that value of 98 with regards to nationalistic views and philosophies. But you get to see that when you come, even people like that I'm just trying to be like, you just have to find that 0.5, resentment of somebody that is coming from northern Nigeria, not because of anything, not because I want, but because of it is what I have grown in to understand, consume, accept. It is rather on that I have matured, I've been educated, I find out, I move, I travel around, and then I get to see all these are just bullish shenanigans that were used to weaponize loyalty to political benefits. So we have to consider that. Definitely. So if you're talking about radical politics, in northern Nigeria, this is its home. This is its grassroots. You have this Arizungur from Bauchi State. You have Malamini Kano from Kano. You have who is that person there from Katsina? Wali, your mentor.
Balausman.
Balaus. So that is it. What happens along that line? You get to say it was just the people that they mentored, people that they put through, so that they can have and escape the reality of the natural rate by which the nature defined and they were built into, so that they can bring in tremendous trickle effect of what they have ushered, so that to bring in sustainability with regards to the breakage of that poverty line and what have you that are already been little experience in northern Nigeria. But what happens? They came back, they just form a cabal, they weaponize everything so that they want to remain at the top of the table. So now the situation is, whenever you are discussing about this thing, one has to be patient. You have to be that patient, because if you're talking to somebody that is 4-year-old, you have to just be patient. Like this is somebody like in Kano, if you want to take a job at Congo, so you just have to have that patience. If not, people, you just get provoked, and then before you know, there is just punches everywhere. But if you start making arguments, and somebody will say, hey, he has done that, you say, all right, sir, calm down, listen. This is democracy. This is the meaning of democracy. This is what is intel. This is what is capitulation. You bring out videos, you show to them and say, this is done at the social rate cost of that. And then let's look at it for real, for instance. Just bring in an analogy that a lot of people can look into it. You are having something, infrastructural building of flyovers at the cost of 11 billion naira, where we don't have a pipe-borne water supply. When it comes to the dry season, you have to pay 200 naira for 25 liters of water. So does it make sense? Which one should come first? So when you have that patient start throwing these kind of questions, and then people will start, people start to reason with you. But then again, one person has to have that, that have honesty and have intention that he's not doing it for himself. He's not doing it just to gain clout and everything. You just have to now never detach yourself from whatever, accommodation and validation. Tell him, no, this is fucking not it. You just have understand this, agree with it. I'm not a magician or I'm not something. I'm just a normal human being that just know this thing. So stop the hailing. This is a democratic system. You are the kings, and this man that you are seeing over there, you can question him. As Wali used to say, body them, you undermine them, you expose them. This is why whenever somebody came, you are discussing this, you are making sense, you are telling people we are going to break away, they will just bring you closer to the table, they will just give you sweets and everything. If you fall into that corruption, but if you don't fall, they then started to think about how they are going to extinguish you. And it is not advocacy that is very easy. It's not easy your life. Because if you started making this suggestion, even from your home, even from your family members, they start telling you that you are not going to change anything, you are not going to bring back anything, nothing can happen, you don't have the ability to do that. People have come before you, they have done this, they have left there. So person now he said he's not going to do that again. But if you succumb to that and believe in that, then it is the total breakage of everything. Now you look into it. We are going to break that. And it is very simple. All I'm telling you, it is very simple. All what people need, we need just vibrant soldiers that are democratic, that they will continue, we continue to hammer the information that this is what democracy means. This is what democracy means. This is what, because if you get to understand the definition of our own democracy with what the definition of democracy is, you get to see that totally in opposite. One is on Earth, one is in Venus. And we don't have rocket that is going to carry us there. But then that is what we are saying, and people are shouting over that as the meaning of democracy. So if we start saying this is the meaning of democracy, this is what it's supposed to be, and this is how we are going to bring in the development, I'm telling you, everybody is going to stop looking at these people. We will just point, look, they are just bloody mediocres. The main problem is to break down the mediocrity meaning to our people so that they understand the concept, because the term is in English.
Comrade, you're actually going in a direction that we wanted to go as well. So I'm very happy that you brought you in, and because I think the one of the big questions that we had in mind to discuss with you folks is the question of popular consciousness, which I think you're starting to address. And I guess the question there is, to what extent because as Ibrahim Wali was describing this phenomenon of ranting, one of the constraints that became evident to myself, and I'm sure to Emeka as well, is of course the constraint of the online space, and you've even talked about the difficulty of network, and beyond network and knowledge of English and familiarity with utilizing Twitter. There's obviously the material obstacle as well, which is that people cannot afford data and people don't even have the phones and such to be able to join the conversation at that level. So I guess the question is, outside of our own kinds of middle class spaces, to what extent is there a growing consciousness of the mediocrity, as you put it, and the sort of degeneracy of the current system? And I want you to, maybe in responding to that, also briefly reflect on what we witnessed in End Bad Governance, the outpouring of protest in northern cities, including Kano. Is there hope there? Can we see that as a reflection of some growing popular consciousness about the degeneracy and the mediocrity of this existing system? Or, were there other factors that contributed to that, maybe more political, factional struggles within the ruling class, that would point to a slightly more pessimistic picture of what happened there? Of course, the Russian flag thing also added to some confusion about our own understanding of whether or not there really was a popular mass response to hunger, to crisis that was driving that protest. So yeah, I guess I wonder, how you would reflect on the state of popular consciousness. Is ranting, so to speak, also happening on the street and within communities, or has it really so far been restricted to middle class spaces? And Comrade, maybe you could take a stab at that first, and then it would also be interesting to hear Wali's take as well. But over to you.
Okay. So you see, God bless you, my brother, and God long live the Rant HQ. When you see what you just mentioned about, that the level of the barriers that are already there, with regards to the level at which people get to access, to the mainstream media, with regards to data, with regards to the sophistication and even understanding Twitter and how it works. For somebody to even know that this is going on weekly, so that he will be there, sat down there, and have whatever it takes. So, to my own understanding of Rant philosophy, is about mind transformation. The little people that we are having, the little people that we are having that are aware that they are self-educated, but due to certain things, they cannot see the things that we are seeing. Is about when we echo that, we wake up that tiger, the trickle-down effect will take them back to the street and start ranting to everybody, because whatever we are having, we whatever we discuss every weekend, when we don't actually, my discussions is always this, like, this rant is not for I, it's greater than me, it's not for everybody, it's for us all, and there is no any reason for us to be waiting till weeks to come so that we will come here and rant. No, even when we are inside so we are inside that pub, we are in the viewing station, okay, wherever, even in the barber shop, okay, even if you are buying how will I forget the words, people that used tomato and everything that used to make stew, you just tell the people the guns, you tell them the gospel that this is what it's supposed to be doing and this is it. So that is the trickle down effect there. We have already, the people that made of the Rat HQ actually were alive. Allah bless them souls, because they're very intellectual people and they have already have everything in place. Just it is, a step walk by walk by walk. And in other aspects, you see, I know the utilization of local radio stations in Kano with our people is the major source of information that our people are having. Let me tell you one thing. We should mind that when we are discussing about Nigerian politics, if you bring somebody is in northern Nigeria that is even living in a remote location, he's going to school a lot of people about the happenings, the pinpointing of things to do, because each and every single time BBC,
I completely agree with that. I mean, you hear a peasant talking about Ukraine and Russia with such eloquence. I mean,
So Rant HQ has already have that. And I'm doing that. Hisham is doing that. Wali is doing it. He needs that national presence. He have everything. He's doing it there. But every time I have some little change, I just run on to radio stations. That political segments that they host discussions, and I discuss the rant. And I have already step away from discussion about political issues. No, I'm just trying to bring in the rant gospel that is awakening our brothers that are able to be present in Twitter. The same thing to be able to our brothers that can listen and chip into it, because it is in simple, plain, verbal, understandable, contextualized house sentencing that is as clear as ABC or eating banana. So it is just that, and people are already have read, and even I think the Mahazab that I usually used to go, they are now thinking of how they are going to bring me on so that we discuss a lot of things, even the program. So this is just part of it. I'm just trying to tell you that we are left, we have already, Ranters to us already moved on that. Like it is not something, we will take more than months to discuss the process of it. And now when you look at what happens with regards to the protest in Kano, I'm going to tell you that, Wallahi Azim, I'm very happy, I'm very proud, because if you weigh it through the intangible benefit by which the protest achieved, it is tremendous, it is magnanimous, and there is no way you are going to discard that. You must keep it in mind. Only time will show us how we are going to use that in order to make it works.
Fantastic. Well,
Right.
thank you for your fabulous response.
Yes, regarding the protest, just like he mentioned, we discussed a lot about whether or not it was a success, and we concluded that it was a success, even though the results can be more measured by using intangible metrics, right? But for me, for example, I think the first win was the fact that there was actually a coordinated and nationally coordinated propaganda against the protest, right? They were telling people to come out, and this included our clerics. The most popular of them, a lot of them, they came out and they tried to say protest is haram, don't come out. So the fact that people defied that in itself, and you would see that in that defiance, many people called them out, some even insulted them, a lot of social media, online and offline. You find that, frankly, it was, for me personally, it was a success, because I needed people to, first of all, really relegate them to issues of spirituality, like when it comes to economics and politics. I don't feel like that their utility is best served in this regard. They can go and they are our scholars, there's no doubt about it. They can nurture to our faith and our spirituality and all of that. But when it comes to these issues that affect us equally, I don't think that they being gatekeepers without any serious grounded knowledge. Because imagine a scholar tells you that protest is haram, but in his fatwa, he doesn't even mention the constitution at all. Right? It doesn't mention it at all. So it leaves you questioning, like, okay, the depth of their knowledge, their sincerity and stuff like that. Okay, is it an Islamic? Are we in an Islamic state now? Okay, there's just, a lot of things. You can't just discard the constitution. You have to bring in the constitution. And if you feel like you can make an argument against it, I'm all ears, right? But at least you have to do something a lot more tangible than just, quote a scholarly fatwa from the medieval century, from the 19th century or the 18th that nobody knows about. That is the thing. The reality is nobody knows about these things. They are not taught in any formal schools, both in the madrasa and in school. Ever since I was a kid, I went to Islamic school and our conventional schools. Nobody ever said that protest was haram. No whatsoever. So you don't just get to come, at some point and start telling us that protest is haram. We know that you are actually, doing the bidding of the political class. So I think that in that regard, people have relegated them to, just spiritual matters, at least to some extent anyway. Secondly, I was involved in the protest personally from Gerkike. And I wasn't sponsored. I wasn't prompted. Nobody told me to join, nothing like that. It was just my own initiative, because obviously it's my right. I have the right? I mean, it's unfortunate that they sort of they turned it on its head and, start introducing treasonous elements and charges and stuff like that. But it was my choice. And to my surprise, because in my area, because I have quite the presence in my local area, I'm involved in my local area in Abuja as well, both in Abuja and Mina, but more in Abuja. To my surprise, I had people in the area, a shop owner, a mechanic, security guards, who were literally, pumped for it. In fact, before just 1 hour or 2 hours ago, when I was coming into the office, one of them said that, Ibrahim, I hope you are prepared for the 1st October protest. Right? At the time, I was the one mobilizing the people, but they are not the one reminding me now because their mind is there, their fitra is there, they are ready. And you find that if you look at most of my protest picture, it was just me, maybe sometimes in suits, in a fine shirt, but you find that people in their usual day-to-day garbs, the mechanic in his usual mechanic clothes, the security guy in his usual, and it was just really all types of Nigerians who were actually battered by the system. Sadly, I realized that people who are more in our class, the middle class, they have. I think that they have a lot more they think that they have a lot more to lose, and they are also playing the self-protection game. So you find that they don't. They can even support you, by speech, maybe even try to offer something, but they just cannot be there, right? They cannot be on ground. They will not be there because they don't trust the system. They are scared of the tear gas. They might be shot, the charges and stuff like that. So in that regard, I felt like, okay, there is a disconnect between the northerner who is already in a state of despair, a state of perpetual despair. That is his day-to-day life. It's not as if he lives properly hand to mouth. He doesn't have any ambition beyond the next meal, right? There's a difference between that and our young bankers, young lawyers, young professionals, and people in that middle class, the professional class, who feel like for some reason they are insulated from the problems, even though you find that most of them can't even transport themselves to work, with their wages and their salary. Sadly, they've not been able to personalize the problem, even though it is actually personal, even though you can see it. Sometimes it's so painful because I'm much more comfortable than most of them. I have a law firm, for example. I pay salaries and I'm relatively comfortable, right?
Right.
But because of this awareness, right? Because of the fact that it's just my nature, it's my fitra. Nobody had to teach me these things. Nobody had to guide me. It was just natural, right? I found myself just inclined towards these issues. So I take a little bit more risk, right? I'm ready to lose it all, frankly. I don't mind the prison stint, for example, right? I've read quite a lot of books on prison, watched documentaries throughout my life. I understand that in the life cycle of an advocate, it is a possibility. It is indeed a possibility. It's just like that. Many people, have come and, they experience it. And even today, a lot of people are in prison as a result, right? So I'm ready for that sacrifice. I'm ready for that challenge. But frankly, I think that there is a disconnect between the actually man in the street and the middle class. And I don't think we've been able to bridge this gap yet. But in terms of the mental aspect, I feel like there's covered a lot of ground. Frankly, not I don't mean the Rant HQ, but like I'm generally in the last 1 year, 2 years, or at least I think the Buhari government, if I'm going to give just one positive, is that it disillusions the people. That there's no messiah in this thing. There's no Atiku or El-Rufai or even Peter Obi. There's nobody that is just going to come and then your life is going to change. Right? So me, for example, I put heat on my local government chairman, local government councillor, House of Reps, senator, right? They are all, players in the same establishment, right? So I don't differentiate them. I don't focus on the presidents only, for example. I literally, in fact, I look at the professional class, I look at the economic class, I try to just look at the society in a much more wider fair to so that we can identify these problems and so that we can really curate solutions.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, on this note of curating and I mean, you started off saying you and I think that you and I are somewhat in the same space in that regard. I don't feel obligated to provide any solutions. I mean, the people who pay, to do that. But for what it's worth, we can't all be structureless, or at the back of our minds, we kind of are working towards some kind of logical conclusion, given the theory of change, where we are and where we want to get to. Where do you think that Ranters HQ might be headed in a more structured sense, And I ask that bearing in mind that, from getting the feelers I get from you, you're based in the nation's capital. But you're from Niger State. And I know from the work that we do on Nigerian scam that there's something brewing in Niger State, even though I can't place my finger on it. There's something simmering under the surface, and we saw that with the end bad governance protest. Yeah, that some of the real hotspots or flashpoints, happened around the Maraba, area. What do you think? How do you think we can synergize all of this? Under within your own platform, how can we move to a more structured way of affecting change? Yeah.
We know the limitations of the system all the same, but one thing that actually typifies the Rant HQ is that the members are still, we still, nobody has the right of passage. You don't just say a thing and it becomes, you have to actually argue it out, right? Like even to come on this space, we had to argue it out, right? So it's like that. Are you going to come as a representative of the HQ? Are you going to come individually and stuff like that? Which is good. It's a good culture. So far, it has helped us because one of the issues that we're looking at is whether we should, transform the movement into either a political party of some sort or a group of some sort. And we're still not decided because we want to do a system where it has nothing to do with us, the members of the Rant HQ, but we just want to establish an objective standard that literally everybody is going to operate on, and I feel like that is going to be the solution so that we don't hinge it on an individual. But what the Rant HQ has done, for example, for me, for example, is that everything that I discuss in the Rant HQ, I have taken it back to my local group. So our area, Boso Locals, for example, in Boso local government, we have a group, we have a WhatsApp group, we have a Facebook group, and stuff like that. So I've since extended the Rant HQ there without mentioning the Rant HQ, by the way, right? But just the arguments and the issues. And so far, I feel like, okay, maybe in 2027, for example, I can have a say in the elections, because you find that so far a lot of people, gradually are beginning to understand the arguments. They are beginning to come to terms with the argument. They are beginning to agree. So in the group, we used to have people, where APCs stalwarts, and they had the money, they had the clouds, and their decisions were final. But it's not the case today anymore, right? People really challenge them, right? We keep saying that, okay, you're not going to use our parents anymore to get your votes and whatever. So it's extended in that regard, but maybe not as wide or as fast as we want it to spread. So we have realized the fact that, okay, this is going to be a long-term project. But in the meantime, all the same, whether it is APC, whether it is PDP or LP, we must hold them to the same standard, because we don't have, I can't wait for 2027, frankly. I just don't have the patience, because people are dying every day. So we must hold every single person to the same standard. So, for example, we have a member of the House of Assembly there. I think he has so far, put a bounty on my head of some sort, an informal one anyway.
Oh, sure.
Not to scare you, it's not a threat to life or anything like that, but just in terms of social capital. But you find that we're asking you, okay, what issues do you guys actually discuss? How have you voted in the last 1 year? What have you voted on and stuff like that? And people are pressurizing him, and already you get the feeling that when it's time for elections, it's going to find it difficult. Right, so that is, I feel like some of the gains so far, but I'm not gonna lie to you, just like Extension said, it's very difficult, and sometimes I'm left to wonder whether there is an end to this, there's a progress. Sometimes I'm thinking, should I just reactivate my London, because half of my family is should I just go back? And I'm like, but that's the thing, it's in my mind anyway. Even if you take me to Australia or China, it's still in my mind, right? Like my people are still on ground, so there's just no escaping it. And for example, I saw he came back, and a lot of I was like, look, that's the thing. This thing is in your mind. You just can't escape it. It's not about economic success for just an individual. So, but at the same time as well, we are also thinking of really how we can either set up a political party or join a political party. Although we are yet to agree with it, because it's just like we said, it's not about changing the current crop. But then what do you replace the current crop with? Would you replace them with? It is just as crucial as changing them, for us. Or even if you are going to change the system, for example, right? If you are going, okay, neoliberalism is what is taking over today. Okay, if you are going to, relegate it, what are you going to substitute it with? That is what we are trying to develop now. For example, me and Hisham were developing an economic model that helps us to insulate local governments for starters and to insulate states from the overall economic, macroeconomic, shocks, because we feel like it doesn't make any sense, for example, for something to happen in Abuja and all 774 local government are going to equally feel it. We feel like it is unwise, it is unreasonable to have a system of that nature. So we're trying to see how we can decentralize this and how we can see if we can gather all these small wins, small results. For example, I'm working with somebody who wants to become chairman of my local government. And you can see we're really putting in real work in terms of developing local solutions. All of the data that we are using are sourced locally. We said, look, let's forget Google for now. Let's just go to the street and gather this information. We were with students. We've gone to all the markets. We've actually sat down to speak with the stakeholders in the market. Sometimes you start to feel as if are you going the same route with the previous set? But then at the end of the day, we have some set of rules that we measure everything by, and I feel like it's our disposition is that as long as we're able to establish these rules, it doesn't matter who comes, who wins, whatever. As long as these rules are etched in the people's mind, then they are going to hold everybody to the same standard. And I think that is what we're trying to do. So we're trying to explore different means, writing, just like Extension says, I rant for a living, or I rant as a second nature, frankly, at home. My girlfriends, all of them, they're tired of me, frankly. My mother, everybody is tired of me already, right? Even my clients are tired of me. Like, Ibrahim, don't you take a break? I'm like, there's just no break. We are literally coming from a losing position. There's no, you're talking about break, but I am telling you, these people are already preparing for 2027. They are preparing. They do elections. They already inform us of what is going to happen in 2027. They are preparing hard. They have the resources. They have the personnel. So we can't afford to take any breaks. But frankly, it's not easy because they are still trying to hedge against the economic shocks, and it's just not easy. But we're doing our best all the same, and we feel like we're making serious progress. Like in TikTok, for example, you see that a lot of people are actually decentralized. I think that there's a youth movement. Tefer Matasa, for example, I don't know what their core is for now, but at least we can agree that the current establishment has failed, and I think they also agree with that. But our problem is, it's not enough to displace them, but what comes after them is crucial as well. So but I have to mention one thing, because it's what really part of what guides me. I'm a Zikist in some sense. I don't know if that makes any sense. Right? Nnamdi Azikiwe is probably the politician that not his politics per se, but like in terms of ideology, right? Because you see that he has detailed it quite quite concisely, and he makes arguments of a local and Africanized theories or anchors. We are going to place all our socio-economic factors on, and I feel like that is the same thing for. That is the same thing, for the Ranters as well. Like we must create our solutions by ourselves.
Yeah. Well, that's probably as good a place to leave it as any. Even though you've raised some very interesting points in that last submission that we would be very tempted to jump right into. For instance, Sikhism. But you know what? We'll have to probably save that for another time, given that we've already exhausted the allotted time.
We're always ready to join these issues, to speak about these
well,
issues.
That's excellent, and we'll certainly reach out again to see if we can make that possible, make that happen, because it's been a fantastic conversation with yourself, Ibrahim Wali, and also with Comrade Hamza Camilo Hamza, who joined in momentarily. So look, thank you once again for making the time and for your very interesting insights, and also for the work you folks do. And I mean, maybe in terms of a final word, do you want to just repeat what times people can join in and what platforms people can find out about the Ranters?
Yes. 9 o'clock, 9 p.m. Specifically, every Saturday. That's where we convene every Saturday on Twitter. Well, I would have to share the accounts, the relevant accounts with you. But if you just come on Twitter and you type Rant HQ or Rant Space or just Rant, I think that you should see it if it's around the time, because there's a lot of people who join. And yes, we have our EGMs, which is more frankly spontaneous and it's difficult to track. But yeah, that is where we do most of our work. But we also have a TikTok extension. We have extension in Facebook as well, and we do quite a lot of things. We release videos, we write articles, our Medium, through Medium, through WordPress, and then we write threads on Twitter as well, and it's just where it's as decentralized as it can get, and that is actually the idea anyway. Because you don't know who is going to run with it, right? We don't think that the change has to actually come from us. We don't think that we have but we feel like as long as the idea gets to the right person with the right mentality, we don't feel like, for example, if you change this political class, then you should come to the Rant HQ and pick your next leaders. No, that is not what that, so.
The message has certainly gotten through now. So you're once again really grateful that you were the messenger. And listen, we definitely want to have you on again. So hope you can join us at some other point. We'll leave it here for now. Thank you very much once again.